Hi, everybody, and welcome. Tonight, we are so privileged to have Debbie Fox, LCSW, um, has a social worker in private practice, a big advocate for child safety, and founder of Safety Kids. That will be talking tonight about keeping our children safe, empowering every parent with tools needed to ensure a safe childhood from the youngest toddler through camp age and teen and beyond. We are so fortunate to have her tonight. As a communal gathering together, I feel it only appropriate that we take a moment to say Tehillim together for the safety of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. So I will begin with that. You can say it together with me. Lamatzeach Mizmor LaDavid, Yancha Adonai B'yom Tzara, Yisagevcha Hashem Elehei Yaakov. Yishlach Ezracha Mikodesh U'Metzion Yisadecha. Yizkar Kol Menchasecha V'Alascha Yidash Nesela. Yitain lecha chavavecha v'chol atzascha yimale. Rana b'shosecha v'shem Eloheinu nigdol. Male Adonai kol mashalasecha. Ata yadati ki yashia Adonai m'shicho. Yaneu m'shmei kadsha b'gvuras yesha yiminod. Ele v'recha ve'ele v'asusim v'anachnu v'shem Adonai Eloheinu naskir. Hema karu v'nafalu v'anachnu kamnu v'nisaitat. Adonai hashia hamelch ya'anenu b'yom karenu. Move on to Kuf Chaf Aleph. Shir Lamarlois Esa Einai El Haharim Ayin Yavai Ezri Me'im Adonai Eiseh Shemayim V'aretz. Ayitein Lamoit Raglecha Al Yanum Shamrecha. Hine Lo Yanum V'Lo Yishan Shemer Yisrael. Adonai Shamrecha Adonai Tzilcha Ayad Yaminecha. Yemem Hashemesh Lo Yakeka V'Yareach V'Layla. Adonai Yishmarcha Mikora Yishmar Es Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmar Es Tzeischa Uva'echa Ma'ata V'Ad Eilam. We'll conclude, as the Rabbanim had requested, for safety in Eretz Yisrael with Kuf Nun. Hallelujah, hallelujah, al Bekarchai, hallelujah, Bekiria Uzai, hallelujah, Beguraisav, hallelujah, Kurav Tulai, hallelujah, Beseka Shafar, hallelujah, Benevel Vechinar, hallelujah, Beseifu Machal, hallelujah, Minim Uvaugab, hallelujah, Betzotzle Shama, hallelujah, Betzotzle Surah, Kol Hanashama, Tahalaya, hallelujah. I'm not sure if the Tehillim moved along with me or not, but I hope that you all were able to say that with me as we pray for the safety in Eretz Yisrael on a global and national level. We can get each increase in our tzedakah and Torah and tefillah as our spiritual ammunition and participation over there. And on a microcosmic scale, we talk about child safety in a private manner. And for that, we will have Debbie Fox present with us tonight. As always, follow us on Instagram at MyMikvah, on Facebook, mikvah.org, or message 732-534-2948 to join our broadcast and be up to date on all future events. Our next session, we will skip next Wednesday. Isruchag, we will begin our next series in 2 weeks from now. We will be having all about shidduch dating for fathers and mothers. We have a men's session and a ladies session open to both parents, and please join in so that you are aware. And so now, without any further ado, I'm going to have Debbie. Thank you, Debbie. You're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you all. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to basically say Tehillim in unity together from women who care and love Eretz Yisrael and those of us who all have family there, and they're all our family. So it feels good to be part of a larger group who's able to stop for a moment and use those tools we have, which is tefillah. So thank you. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be focusing on the area of safety in our own children. And what I'm really going to do, what I was asked to do tonight, is that many of you may know that we do have a child safety program called Safety Kid. I know that it's been in, I think, most schools in Crown Heights. And I was asked to give the parent workshop that we give with our Safety Kid program. So I'm going to start out just because my understanding is I have you from all over the country. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the program, and then we're going to go on with our specific parent workshop. So our program is one that is sensitive to the needs of each community. And you can see we have 3 different figures of Safety Kid. We have one for groups that we call them the more modern Orthodox groups. We have one for the more yeshivish groups, and then we have one where Safety Kit is totally in Yiddish. At this point, Safety Kit is in English, Spanish, Yiddish, and Flemish, and is used in each of those areas. Mexico City, every school in Mexico City, many of the schools in Belgium, and throughout the United States, in many cities, every school within the city, Denver, Miami, Chicago, Philadelphia, some New Jersey, Lakewood, different Crown Heights, Far Rockaway, Queens, all these areas, really they have had a train the trainer, and they bring the program to everybody, which is how we create safety within communities. In this parent workshop, what we go over is that what we actually did many, many years ago, it's now like 13 years ago or so, that there were different incidents at the time of child sexual abuse within the Orthodox community and here in Los Angeles. And at that time, we didn't know what to do with it. And the Rabbanim were incredibly involved, and they asked me to find a prevention program. I researched many programs and came up with a program from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which actually really worked within our cultural sensitivities. And so we took our cultural sensitivities into our community experiences, and we tailored the program. They actually gave us a mentor for a year, and their mentor stayed with us, helped us tailor it, and we developed very practical steps towards child safety. At this point, it's over about 70,000 children, their parents and teachers that have benefited from the program. And this is how our model works. Our belief is that it takes a community to create a safe environment for a child, but it also takes a community to allow. So when we take all the factors and put them together, which we're going to talk about, we really create a shield for our children. If we leave blank spaces, then we allow opportunities for abuse to occur. So we really focus on the concept of a community model. What does that entail? We begin by going into schools, and we begin by doing an administrative workshop where we really look for active leaderships within schools, where we focus on the school itself and creating a foundation of safety within the school. The second piece we do is we go to parents, and we do the full parent workshop that we're going to all go do together. Now, what you're hearing is also, by the way, when we go to schools, we do a very intensive 2-hour staff workshop with the staff in each school on prevention, but also what's the teacher's role in prevention? How can they help? And there are many ways teachers can help. So what we do is we take that which we have with the schools and the teachers, and that which we give the parents, and we create a shield for children. Because the bottom line is, we are going to teach your children tools towards their keeping themselves safe, but the responsibility of their safety is on the parents and on the schools, is on the adults in their lives. So you have to be prepared first. So we create a shield between the school and the parents, and only then do we go into the kids. And when we go into the kids, we teach them what we call the ABCs of safety, which are whatever we can, the skills that we can to keep them safe from any inappropriate touch, inappropriate relationships, inappropriate situations. We give them the skills, but only after you know what we're going to be telling them, and only after that shield has been created for them. This is what we're talking about when we talk about a safe community. Your rabbis need to be educated, school administrators, teachers and staff, the parents, the children. Everybody has to have education and awareness, and that's what really creates a safe community, where there's no gaps for anything to occur, because we all communicate, and we communicate in the same language. And that's what prevents abuse from occurring within our communities. This question comes up everywhere I go, which is, I'm talking about people being inappropriate with our children, right? And the question is always the same in every community I go to. Really? In our community? It couldn't happen in our community. We know everybody in our own community. And we live in an area where everybody around us is Jewish or religious, and we know them and they're friends and whatever. It could never happen. So what I ask you all to do is to stop for a moment. I ask you each to think about in your own lives, how many of you have a friend or a relative or possibly your own story of somebody who's been inappropriate with a friend or a relative or possibly yourself. If you know even one, and that's each one of you, that's way too many that have been affected in our community. And our goal is to look at how we can each make a difference. I do want to say just one small thing, an important thing, which is that anybody who has their own story may feel triggered by tonight's workshop. It's a prevention workshop. My hope is that it will feel healing to you to know that so much is being done to protect our children and from making sure this never happens to them. But if it does trigger you, make sure that you get the appropriate support. So here's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with really talking to you about how important it is for us to have an approach with which to approach our children on speaking to them about preventing anybody from being inappropriate with them, right? So we're going to talk about a very broad approach, but it's going to apply to everything we're going to say tonight. And this approach in so many ways is really the key to the tool that's really going to help us keep our own children safe. So, how many of you have safety rules in your home? Okay. How many of your children know that if they want to go in a car with you, that they can't go in if they're not in their car seat? How many of your children know that if they see matches, they'll say it's dangerous? They know that. How many of you know, your children know that if they see pills, they're not allowed to touch them? They know the rules. How do they know? Who taught them? You did. Was it difficult for you to teach them safety rules in the house? Most people say no, it was natural. My kids see matches, they know they're dangerous. I taught them that. It was natural. Hold on to that. How about halachic rules in your homes? How many of your children, when you're going on a trip and you stop at a gas station, say, Mommy, can I get this? Is it kosher? Right? How many of your children know that after they're 3 years old, they're going to get tzitzis and they're going to be wearing them? How many of them wouldn't walk out of the house without a yarmulke? How many know that on Shabbos, they would never turn on or off a light? All our children know that. How do they know? Who taught them? You did. Was it hard? No, it's halacha. That's not hard. We could teach them halacha. When it's Shabbos, you don't turn on and off lights. And how many houses are we saying, Shabbos, right? We teach them that. It's natural, right? Okay. How many of you have taught your children about personal safety at home? This is often when it gets sticky. How many of you have said to your kids, if anybody ever tells you a secret and tells you not to tell mommy and tati, you have to tell me immediately. How many of you have gone over how to call 911 with your kids? How many of you have sat down and had talks about private parts of their body? How many of you have said to them, you can say no to anybody who ever wants to touch, look at, or talk about the private areas of your body? Okay, some, the numbers are far less than those who talk about matches and car seats and things, right? So we want it to be as natural to talk about personal safety, where you would say, your children would say, no, matches are dangerous. I can't touch matches. No, we can't turn on lights on Shabbos. No, nobody's allowed to touch my private areas of my body. I would have to say no and tell my mother immediately. hear the naturalness of the way that I just said all three of those? That's what you need to learn tonight, is how to discuss all these areas with the same natural tone. Here's an important statistic. It's fewer than 30% of parents that have discussed abuse prevention with their children. Fewer than 30%. And yet, what is the single most important tool towards keeping all of our children safe from abuse? You, the parent. You are the most important tool. And only 30% bring up the topic to their children. And what the statistics have shown is that of those children that have been molested, 70% of those who have told their parents or told the trusted adults in their lives were not responded to. They weren't heard, and they either never told again, or those are the people who 20 years later come out with a story that's very deep and very dramatic for them, because it took them that long to feel comfortable to say it when they weren't heard or validated the first time. So you as parents, your role is critical. And hopefully we're going to give you the tools towards knowing how to fulfill that in a healthy way for your children. Now, I know this is a bit of a funny slide, but I think it's a really healthy approach. It's kind of what you're hearing from me as I'm speaking tonight, which is that I say that whatever you talk about in reference to abuse prevention and your children keeping their bodies safe, you need to use what I call the peanut butter and jelly approach, which means if you were to say to any one of your children, would you like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or would you rather have a cream cheese sandwich for lunch? Do you really care what they're going to say? You don't. Meaning, it's very easygoing tone. Do you want peanut butter and jelly? Do you want cream cheese? Which could I give? When you talk about their bodies and their safety, you need to do everything possible to have that same natural tone. Ooh, matches are dangerous. We can't touch those. No, we never touch electricity. Can't do that. That would be dangerous, right? Oops, no, that's not kosher. We can't get that one. We'll get you another one. You hear the naturalness, right? Nope, when you have your friend over and you're playing in your room, can't play with private parts. No, I'll tell you what, come on into the kitchen. I'll give you some magnetiles. We'll play in there. All in a very natural tone. And that's what we're going to talk about. You are their best defender and their best protector. And we're going to help you learn those tools and that approach to make it as natural as possible. So these are the topics we're going to talk about. We're going to start by understanding who might abuse children. Then we're going to move to safety and supervision at home. We're going to talk briefly about some tools for safety in everyday situations. We're going to talk about recognized warning signs. And then the last thing we're going to talk here about is going to be kink. Those are the topics we're going to talk about. Okay, so let's start by getting a greater understanding of who might abuse children. The statistic that might be most important for all of us to understand when we talk about who might abuse children is that over 90% of children are abused by someone who is known, loved, and respected by the child. Whereas we all feel like if anybody would be inappropriate with my child, it would be some stranger who comes off the street wearing a raincoat and a hat and then is inappropriate and drops my child back in. What we need to understand is that over 90% of those who are inappropriate with our children are actually those within our world. So who might that be? 68% of molestation occurs at the hands of a family member. which could be a parent or a step parent. It could be a grandparent, an aunt or an uncle, a brother, a sister, or a cousin, someone familiar to the family friend or neighbor, or anybody who has access to a child, like a teacher or a coach, a counselor, a religious leader, mental health professional, caregiver, a babysitter. I'm going to tell you something. I don't believe in scare tactics, and scare tactics research show us do not work. And yet I would say that those of you who are looking at this slide say, wait a minute, you tell me you don't believe in scare tactics, yet you show me that it could be anybody. What we are going to look at is understanding who might abuse a child. We're going to understand the dynamic why, because what we said your tool is awareness. The more aware you are, the more you can protect your child. We're going to talk about the awareness, we're going to understand it, and then we're going to talk about what are tools for you as a parent to prevent it. So that's what we're looking at, not to frighten you, to make you aware. And then once you get the dynamics that you're looking for, then what we're going to do is we're going to give you some tools as a parent to help make sure you can prevent it. Something that's important for you all to know is that abusers are really often able to identify vulnerable children and families, and then they gain access and trust of the family. Very often, it happens to be right now, I'm working with the community, and when they called, the first thing they told me is that the child who accused this teacher, that the child was not believable, came from a very dysfunctional home, and was always kind of a problem. Now, I'm going to say, I don't know. I'm not a court of law. I don't know what did or didn't happen. But what I do know is he's a perfect candidate for a predator. A child that nobody would believe, a child from a dysfunctional family, child who's in a vulnerable situation. It's a perfect candidate for a predator. So we have to look out for when there are vulnerabilities. And in essence, there are vulnerabilities in every house at different times. If a mom's just had a baby, she may not be able to focus on the other children. If there's financial stress in the family, if there's an illness in the family, if you're very worried about a family member who's living in Eretz Yisrael right now. I have a niece in Lud, or the city was destroyed, right? If there's marital stress, if there's been a divorce, if there's a special needs child, if there's an ill grandparent, there's so many things that could create stress in a home where a child feels a need for maybe more attention, and that makes him more vulnerable. I wanted to say basically is that when an adult or an older child inappropriately touches somebody in the private areas of their body, that's considered molestation. And that includes not only adults, but it does include older children. And it even includes, at times, children of the same age if there's a power differential, where the one child is controlling the other. What's important for us to understand is that up to 1/3 of molestation occurs at the hands of other youth and peers, not just adults. And the rate of child-to-child incest, which is brother, sister, I add uncle and cousin into that because that's very prevalent, it's estimated to be at least 5 times higher than the parent-child incest. And incest, of course, is that which happens within the family. The reason that I bring this up is that very often people are aware of adults but don't pay attention to other kids, certainly are not concerned about siblings. Within the Orthodox community, the issue of siblings is extremely concerning. And so we want to make sure that we are aware as parents and that we know how to speak to our children and address our children and how to keep our children safe at home as well. Okay, we said we're going to talk very briefly about the profile of an offender. So you know what you're looking out for. Like we said, we're not really looking for stranger danger because it's very rare. But what would you be looking for? There isn't really a scientifically valid child molester profile, but there are characteristics that we could look out for. They look like you and I. They're generally likable, not perverts in a dirty raincoat. They have a level of friendliness with children that could set off concerns. You know, I've often said that in every city that I ever go to, people will ask me, someone will raise their hand at a workshop and say, in our shul, there's this one guy who's always playing with kids. If they're setting off concerns, it's something to be concerned about. They spend their time in places one wouldn't expect them, like private places in shul or in school. You've invited guests to your house, and certainly there's an older child or even an adult who's in your child's bedroom with them or locks doors. Those are all things that might make you concerned. They get their social needs met through relationships with children as opposed to adults. Something you'll hear from me over and over tonight: adults should play with adults and kids should play with kids. Adults shouldn't get their social needs met through relationships with kids. Spend excessive amounts of time on the phone or emailing or texting with the child. Spend a lot of time in children's group rooms or kiddish rooms or that kind of thing. And buy children special gifts or want to take them places. These are all things to look out for in terms of an offender. Now, how does that offender actually access your child? And that's an important question, because if you think about it, if I were to walk over to any one of your children and just say, take your pants off, they wouldn't do it. They'd say, you're nuts. She's weird. Mom, she's crazy. They wouldn't do it. And yet, children get molested. The best of the statistics we have today are 1 in 10 children. The more concerning statistics is 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys that are molested before they hit the age of 18. So we know that it happens. So how does it happen? Like I said, if I walked over to any one of them, they wouldn't do it. And yet it happens. So what's the process? How does it get there? And it's a process called grooming. The more you know about grooming, the more you as a parent can prevent it. It's specifically designed to gently woo a child into a sense of ease with the person so that they kind of blur any boundaries, blur an awareness that anything inappropriate could possibly be happening. So we're briefly going to talk about that process. The first thing they do is target children. They often will target many kids. They could target 40 or 50 kids at a time. They could target lots of kids. And what they see is who responds to their attention. When someone responds to their attention, they give them more attention and see, do they continue to be responsive? That's what they're looking for, is the children that respond. And they generally look for vulnerable situations, right? That's what they look for. It doesn't always have to be, but in general, they find a child who somewhat responds. And then they start kind of gaining that child's trust. They find little natural ways of becoming a part of a child's life. They might walk down the same block on Shabbos and say, come, let's walk to shul together. Natural way, wouldn't raise anybody's suspicions of anything. They might share an interest. Let's say a kid is real interested in landscaping. So they start talking landscaping with them, or interested in sports. They start talking sports with them. They gain their trust in a very natural way. Nobody would think a thing. Everybody might say, gee, that's really nice, right? And then they start to fill a need, okay? Maybe like a parent-like role for the child, or somehow or another making this relationship feel very special. They might get them lots of gifts, a lot of extra attention, play games with them, take them on trips, things like, I know what you need. I know what you need more than others. Calling them up and saying, gee, how'd you do on that science test? I know you really studied. I know it was hard for you. How'd you do on that? Do you want me to come study with you? And they build an emotional dependence that is sprinkled with gifts compliments, making them feel very special, and most importantly, making this relationship very special. So I'm just going to give you a little example that happened several years ago, and I've used this example before, which is a woman called me, and she said that her child was now in 6th grade, and when he was in 5th, he had a science teacher that everybody really liked, a very popular science teacher. He did well in science, and 5th grade moved on to 6th. One day, the 6th grade teacher calls her son at home, okay, appropriate, I guess, that he called at home, and said, you know what, I'd like to come teach you computers. So I could just come to your house and I'll teach you computers. And the kid thought, wow, that's great. And he asked his mom, Mr. Mechanic wants to come teach me computers. And she's like, okay. And so he started coming once a week and teaching computers. And then one day he came and he's teaching computers and he bought him a cheese Danish. And mom called me and she said, wait, I'm waking up. What is this about? Why is a 35-year-old science teacher have an interest in calling my child from his student from a year ago and coming to my house, donating his time to teach him computers when I don't even want him to learn computers? And why is he bringing him Danishes? I don't want this. And what we were able to say is, if this doesn't feel good and doesn't feel comfortable, you need to stop it. You need to stop it. That's enough for you to stop the relationship. And that is what she did. It took her a little while to understand why, and this is what she said, why isn't a 35-year-old going out with other 35-year-olds once a week? What is he doing in my house with my child when I didn't ask him and he's not getting paid? And that was a good question. And so we need to understand grooming so that we can prevent it, right? Now, what happens once they start to fill a role in the child's life is the child starts to feel dependent on that person. And the child's world is different than all their friends. Their friends, their 6th graders, are playing with other 6th graders. They're playing ball, they're fighting, they're talking about whatever they talk about. That's what they're doing. But this kid has another world going on. He's got this adult-child relationship that takes up a lot of space, where he's getting treated really special, where there's all these conversations. His world is different, and that isolates him from talking to the other kids because he can't talk to them about what's going on. Once the child is isolated and doesn't quite fit in with the rest, that's when the groomer has the ability to become physical. And that's when he starts with little things like touching him on his face. Are you feverish? You feeling okay? You're a little bit pink there today. Do you have a fever? Let me check, right? Or giving him a bear hug because he did a great job, or he got a goal in his football, hockey. I don't even know which one he did a goal. I think hockey. Just giving him a bear hug, and the touch increases gradually from the face to lots of shoulders to lots of that kind of good old guy touch, right? Or if it's an appropriate guy with a girl touch, right? It's gradual. And it's gradual so that when that touch slips and becomes inappropriate, which is not a slip, it's intentional. When the touch becomes inappropriate, what is a child to do? Remember, I asked you, if I say, take off your pants, what will they do? They won't. But how do they say no now? This is the process that led to it. How do they say no when someone's been so nice, given them so much? This touch was okay, that touch was okay. What will I do? Right? And that's when the groomer or the predator actually maintains control. And generally will start to threaten them and say things like, well, you can go ahead and tell your parents, but I'm going to have to tell them that you wanted it. And I was just trying to make you happy. I think they'll be pretty ashamed of you. Or if you tell anybody, I will kill your siblings. There are many threats that people give. So this is the grooming process. Now, I promise that we'll bring up the issues. We'll talk about awareness, then we talk about parent prevention, and that's what we need to do right now. You need to be aware and pay attention to the people in your child's life and to their relationships with your children. Are you comfortable with the relationship? Is this an adult who's getting their needs met from a child? What's their role in your life? That's what happened with the woman who the teacher was no longer a teacher. What's their role in your child's life? Be aware. And of course, if you ever have that uncomfortable feeling about the relationship, think about it, act on it. That's really important. You're the parent. It's your job to figure that out, to think about that. If you're uncomfortable, you need to do something about it. I've had parents say that they felt a Rebbe paid too much attention to their child. I've said, go have an open discussion. Let them know what your concerns are. It's not to accuse them, but it is to let them know. I've had people say that about coaches, camp counselors. You have to approach it. You have to deal with it. You're the parent. You need to know that when your child goes out with anybody, you have to be asking the questions. Where is your child going? Who are they with? What are they doing? And when are they returning home? When you know this information, you can protect them. When you don't know this information, they're just gone, and you don't know what questions to ask when they get back. And there's much less ability to protect them if they don't show up. So that's important. And remember, you stay involved in all adult-child relationships. In a healthy adult-child relationship, let's say a mentor and one of your children, the mentor is happy to come in and tell you how your child did, give you some feedback, ask you. You see a very comfortable relationship in which you are included, right? If there's a relationship that is leaving you out, not including you, or seems to be grooming you away, that's something you need to be aware of. Teach your child that adults should be friends with adults and that children should play with children, especially when you go to shul. When your children are in any type of shul environment, you need to let your children know where they can be, where they are supervised, and where they are not. And that their job, if they're in shul and they're playing, they play with kids in open areas and not with adults. And most importantly is this next part, which is tell your children that I'm going to kind of model it, okay?
I'm going to pipe in again one more time to ask you to just speak, yeah, like that, really close to the mic. Thank you.
Okay. Tell your children what you'd want to do is really kind of have a conversation with your children. And it might go something like this. We haven't talked about prevention lately and personal safety lately. And I thought it would be a good time for us to have that discussion. So, there's a couple things I wanted to say about it. I just think that it's really important that you know that nobody is allowed to look at, touch, or talk about the private areas of your body. Nobody. And I want you to know that I'm teaching you that your body belongs to you and you're 100% in charge. And you can say no to anybody. You could say no to a rabbi. You could say no to a parent, a grandparent, a brother, a sister, anybody, right? You're in charge of your body. But if anybody does want to talk to you or look at or talk about the private areas of your body, I want you to come talk to me about it because I care. I can help you, but I care. And I will always believe you and trust you, no matter what you say to me. And I will never blame you, no matter what you say to me. I just want to hear, because if you tell me, I'm able to help you. And you'll never be in trouble for telling me. So this is just one gentle conversation that lets them know, I'm your parent. I'm telling you that no one should touch or look at or talk about your private areas of your body. And you can always tell me, I'm always here. And you'll never be in trouble for telling me. I want to know. Okay? That's the conversation. That's prevention, is having that conversation. I'm going to start with safety and supervision at home. What I want to say is that it's really important that parents are supervising even at home. And a lot of times we feel that safety at home, but it's important that you know that we all have to provide supervision in our own homes. I'm going to give you a quote from someone who was a client of mine. This young lady was a client of mine, and over, I think it was about a 3-year period, every Shabbos, her brother, when her parents took a nap, her brother was inappropriate with her in her bedroom. And she talked about how she would cry and just the words that were in her head throughout the whole thing were, if somebody would walk in here once, this would stop. And in the 3 years, nobody walked in. Nobody ever walked in. And what we want to do is to make sure that we are present, that we are supervising, and that our children know that we are present and that we supervise at home. So let's start with the natural. Let's just start with what should we be concerned about and what should we not. Now, if every one of you have had children, you all know that kids play doctor and there's a natural curiosity, right? We all know that. And children are naturally curious and they do want to know about their bodies too, right? Playing doctor is normal, it's natural, and what we never have to be concerned about is if it's that, I'll show you mine, you show me yours, that mutual play, that's exactly what it is, mutual play. If you were to come along and it was just simple, I'll show you mine, you show me yours, they're just playing doctor, that kind of thing, your reaction is to be very calm. Whoops. We never play games with the private areas of our body. Touching the private areas of our body is never a game. Why don't you come into the kitchen? We'll take out Legos. I'll give you some cookies and we'll play in the kitchen. You want to state the rule, touching the private areas. You can look in your nose, you can check your knees, you can play with your toes, but we can never play with the private areas of our body. Okay, let's go. State the rule and redirect. Give them Legos, give them cookies. You've educated them and stated the rule. Okay? That most natural situations in normal kids react to that. Let's say you come across something that's a little bit suspicious. You're not quite sure what they're playing with or what they're doing. Let's say they're really hiding and you don't know what's going on, or there's some kind of game going on and you don't know what's going on. What do? You remain really calm. Really calm. If you freak out and you go, what's going on here? What are you doing? Where are your clothes? If you freak out, they will freak out. They will not respond. You won't find out what's going on. If you're really calm, it's a higher likelihood that you can create an educational moment out of it, a teachable moment. So ask simple questions. Hey, what game were you playing? Is there anybody else you've ever played that game with? Can you tell me how you played the game? First thing you would do is say, let's get your clothes on, let's come out, let's talk about it, right? Because then you can get some information, and that would be important, okay? You want to use that innocent game of playing doctors, a window of opportunity. You want to discuss the body, teach them the rules, answer their questions, but be very clear so that you're using it as a window of opportunity to teach them. Now, what should you be concerned about? What should you be concerned about? You should be concerned if one child is victimizing another or using power over another. One mother actually had a 6-year-old boy playing with her 4-year-old daughter, And she came in, saw them playing doctor. She redirected them, brought them into play Magna-Tiles, gave them cookies, and within moments he had taken her daughter into the bathroom, locked the door, and she was screaming, "Don't pull my panties down, don't pull my panties down." That's using power over her. That would be concerning, right? If they can't be redirected, every time you redirect them, they're back doing the same thing, which sometimes has happened in preschools. They find that children, the same child, maybe is doing that over and over with different children in the preschool. If it includes more adult-like and concerning behaviors that you would look at and say, my gosh, how could they possibly know that? It's shocking. How could they know that? If it includes the use of their mouth or any objects in the private areas of their body, and if they are threatening children that if you tell, I will hurt you, those are concerning play. And if there is concerning play, then I would say consult your local mental health professional who's trained and have them help you determine what you need to do about it. Okay? Okay. Let's talk about prevention at home and a bit of a conversation with your child. Again, you want to find a really natural moment for it. What you don't want to do is say, okay, I went to this workshop and we're supposed to talk to our kids. Sit down, we have to have a conversation. You don't want to do that, right? What you want to do is find a natural setting. A really natural one is coming up for a lot of you, which is camp's about to come, right? So you might take your daughter out and get her a bathing suit and come home and say something like, I'm putting your bathing suit away. And you know what I was thinking? We haven't had a talk about personal safety in a really long time. Or have we ever really sat down and talked about it? I don't think we have. I think we should just talk a little bit before you go to camp. Some things that I think might be important. And I'd like that for the conversation to be a mother-daughter conversation. I feel like maybe I haven't done it before, and it's time we do. So I just want to make sure that you know that your body belongs to you and that everybody in your life has to respect that. Again, you want to go over who everybody means. Everybody means your brothers, your sisters, your cousins. It means even a rabbi. It means a camp counselor or anybody in camp. It means a grandparent or an uncle. It means anybody or a friend. But your body, the private areas of your body belongs to you. Everybody has to respect that. Any touching or talking about or looking at your body, the private areas of your body, that's never a game and it is never a secret. So if anybody ever said, like maybe sometimes in camp or if there was a sleepover or even in school and someone said, it's just a touching game, you know that that's not allowed. That's against the personal safety rules. You need to say, no, I don't play games with private parts, and you need to tell me. And if anybody ever says anything about the body and they say it's a secret, you know it's an automatic do tell. They need to tell you immediately. Even if they want to show you pictures of private parts, videos, or websites, automatic. You need to come tell mommy, okay? And if anybody, even at home, wants to look at, touch, or talk about the private areas of your body, or wants you to look at or touch or talk about their private parts, you need to come tell me immediately. That way I can help. I can be of help. You can say no anytime you're uncomfortable with anybody, no matter who it is, even if it's an adult or a teacher or a family member or your brother or a sister, anybody. You can say no if you're in touch, if you're uncomfortable with them or uncomfortable with their touch. And even sometimes you really are uncomfortable and you want to say no, but you can't get the words out. It's really hard. Even then, as soon as you can get away, come tell me, even if something happened, and I'll help you and protect you. I'm your parent. I'll always believe you and protect you. no matter what happened or who it happened with or when it happened, I'll always love you and protect you. The most important thing is you let me know so I can help you out. So I'm going to say I gave you a lot of information at one time. You might split that up with your children, not say it all together, but those are the messages. And this is the tone. Peanut butter and jelly, very soft and confident and comfortable. Because what you need your children to know is if anything ever happens, my mom cares. My mom brought it up to me. It means I can go back to her. If you don't bring it up to your own children, they are not going to bring it up to you. Okay? So I'm just going to talk about a couple of things that help. Bring up what if situations. These what if situations are wonderful because it lets you know a little bit about how your kids are thinking and you can brainstorm together some best responses. So let's just say someone gets lost on a trip to the park. You take the kids to SeaWorld on Holomoid or something like that, right? You can say to your kids, "What would you do if you got lost and we were at this park?" I can tell you that my grandchildren often tease. We drive up to a parking lot anywhere we go, and my grandchildren will yell out. Well, the older ones will say, "Who's giving the safety speech?" They tease me about it, and they'll give it in a very funny way. They'll give it. But what the first thing they'll do is say, "What color are the T-shirts of the people who work there?" So they know who safe helpers are. That they want to stay in public areas. They never want to go into a side area. And when we get there, we meet and we talk about what we would specifically do when we got there. So it's a conversation to have. You can even say to them, what would you do if a friend or even a brother or sister said they wanted to play a touching game? What would you do? Like, for instance, your daughter says she wants to go to an overnight with friends. That's a window of opportunity when you go over rules with them to say, what would you do if somebody wanted to watch an inappropriate video or look at pictures? What would you do? If you could say to them, so I'm just going to go over one or two of these. What would you do if the doctor wanted to check your private parts? And then go over and have a discussion about why a doctor might need to check their private parts and how you're in the room and how it's not a secret. So what you want to do is just give them some of these what if situations and see what happens. One thing that I'm going to talk about that's really important also is windows of opportunity, that if your child says something or a situation comes up, what you do with that can create a real open window of opportunity for a discussion. For instance, my grandchildren, I take them every Erev Yom Tov. We go to the Flower Mart in Los Angeles. The Flower Mart is in downtown LA, and most of you probably have not been to downtown LA, but it is a very frightening area because there are homeless people everywhere. So one time I went and I got a parking space, which you never do, and it's really hard. But there were homeless people lined up on the side. And my granddaughter looked at me. I was so thrilled to get a parking space. And one of my granddaughters looks at me and she goes, "Safta, I'm scared." So I said, "What?" She said, "I'm uncomfortable here." I said to her, "If you're uncomfortable, we have to respect that. We're going to leave the parking place and go find a parking lot." It was a window of opportunity. She told me she's uncomfortable. I have another granddaughter who I took to a fabric mart to pick some fabric for her bat mitzvah for tablecloths. We went in and out of all these stalls and she loved it. She went in one place, she looked at me and she said, "Safta, can we walk out?" I said, "Sure." We went out, didn't say anything all day. That night I sat on her bed and we were schmoozing and she said, "I didn't like the man. He paid too much attention to me and he kept getting too close. I wasn't comfortable." You want them to be aware of what they're not comfortable with and that they share that with you. If one of your kids doesn't want to kiss a relative, don't say, "Go, go, go, go kiss her, go kiss Bubby, go kiss her." You say, "You know what? They're not quite comfortable now. Let's see how they're feeling later." You let your child know you respect their discomfort, right? This is just an important one. An older child is jumping on a younger child, and the younger child is yelling, no, no, stop, no. And everybody sits around and is laughing, right? I can tell you that I once walked into a house and there was this 6-year-old who was jumping on his like 3-year-old sister, and he's yelling, no, no, no. And this father walks in, picks up the 6-year-old boy, puts him in his room, says to him, when somebody says no, you never have the right to touch them. She said no, you can never keep touching her. And he closed the door. And this little child got up and he said to the little one, when you don't want someone to touch, and it was good that you said no, but also tell mommy and Tati. That father was 100% appropriate, and he taught his son a rule. When someone says no, it's no. And you have to teach your children that rule. You have to teach all your children. If someone told them don't touch, then don't. If someone says don't tickle me, you're not allowed to tickle them, right? So if a child says don't tickle me, it's not funny for you to tickle them. You have to listen to those rules. Most importantly, before bedtime, sit with your children and have a conversation. Let them know that that's a special time. We call it in our family schmooze time. That's a time that you kind of check in with them, because when they're in that relaxed setting, they're more likely to tell you. You can't sit with every child every night because there may not be enough nights of the week, but you can sit with them at least once a week. 10 minutes or 15 minutes creates a relationship. Let's talk quickly about prevention at home. Talk to your children about the rules of safety. Children of all ages must be supervised at home. I say keep all doors open when your children play with friends, siblings, cousins, and other family members. As much as can be done in open areas of the house, the better it is. Create safety rules around bathing and dressing times, and include your children in creating those rules. Random checks at short intervals create a safe environment, which means if you have lots of people over for a Yom Tov meal or a Shabbos meal, and after everybody's had the challah, the kids are gone for 2 hours, that's not safe, because all the adults are sitting and all the kids are in bedrooms. You need to have shifts where people get up and just go see how everybody's doing, how you doing, what you're playing. You don't say, what are you guys doing in here? You just schmooze. Just check in. But what the kids know is every 20 minutes, half hour, whatever, someone's coming in to just say hi. You don't have 2 hours that's unsupervised. A parent called me after a workshop and she said, please say that if you wake up in the middle of the night or before you go to bed, check every child's bedroom. Let them know you care, because that means that they don't have long periods at night that they know nobody will walk in. They know that people do walk in, that parents do walk in, and that can really be an important prevention. So remember that it's important that they know there's a Yotze v'Nechnasa coming and going. I am going to talk about a difficult conversation. The difficult conversation really, and I'm going to go over it with you despite the fact that I think this is all women, is really a conversation that I believe dads have to have with their sons. So you'll have to go over it with them. But what we know is that within Orthodox families, an area of great concern is older boys and younger boys or siblings, or areas like even in a yeshiva or whatever. And dads have to tell children those same rules about touch. Molestation and incest, they're not just not theistic or not nice, it's actually against the law. And that can create one of the most horrible scenarios a parent could go through, is to have a son or a cousin or a relative be the predator or the abuser, and a daughter or a son being the victim. What I'm going to say to you all is, you need to do everything to prevent that from happening, because it is so painful when it does. And so the open conversation is that a father needs to say that you are never allowed to, nobody's allowed to touch, look at, or talk about your body. And if anybody does, come let me know. And you are not allowed to touch, look at, or talk about anybody else's body. You're also not allowed to show anybody the private areas of your body. Those are things you're never allowed to do. You teach them to say no to anybody else, but you also let them know if this is ever a struggle for you, then you need to let me know and I'll help you. If you're ever feeling like, you know what, but I, I really was thinking of touching my sister, or it's a struggle for me. I think about it. I'm here and I can help if you let me know. Now, I'm going to tell you that several years ago, a father came to me, and after I gave this workshop in a particular city, and he said to me, I can't have that much discussion with my kids. I can't tell them, no one's allowed to touch your private areas, and you're not allowed to touch theirs, and you can't show them yours. And he's like, they're going to look at me and they're going to roll their eyes and I, Tati, really, and whatever. And I said to him, because they'll roll your eyes at you, would you not have what could be a critical discussion? And he said, well, I'll think about it. I got a call from him, I don't know, maybe it was 8 months later or so. And he told me that he had had a terrifying experience on Friday night, but he thanked me. He said that he had had this conversation and he told his son, if it is an area of concern, you can always come talk to me. I'll always be available. I'll be there for you. That was the way he phrased it. He said at 2:00 in the morning on a Friday night, his son was home from yeshiva, and he got a knock on his door. And his son says, Tati, you said I could always come talk to you. He said he got up in the middle of the night, he was shaking, put on his robe, and he thought, I know when I said that. And he says, Mrs. Fox said, calm, stay calm, stay calm. I'm trying, I'm going to be calm. And he walked into the den, and they were sitting on the couch together. And he said, how can I help you? And the boy said, Tati, I just went into my sister's room and I touched her. It's not the first time. And the father said, with my right arm, I put my arm around him and I thought to myself, I will kill you for violating my daughter. And with my left arm, I put my arm around him and I said to him, I love you and I will get you help. Thank you for telling me. We need to know that these conversations are important, that we never want this to occur in our own homes. These conversations prevent them from happening in yeshivas. It is an important conversation to have in yeshivas before they go to yeshiva and before boys go to camp. These conversations to prevent others from touching them or them from chas v'shalom touching others. These are very important conversations to have. So I just want to make sure that you hear that as well. Okay, we're going to very quickly go through some of these. These are just simple things that you need to know. One is play dates. Always when your child goes on a play date, make sure that you know whose house they're going to. You know the parents' information. Hopefully you know who the parents are and you trust them and you're comfortable with them. Make sure your child is comfortable when you say you're invited to Ari's house, that they want to go and they feel comfortable. Ask them questions when they get back. Have a conversation. What did you play? Were you comfortable? Who was there? Did you like being in their house? The thing is conversation. We talk about this over and over tonight. Ask them. Babysitting. Before, I know it is hard for you all to get babysitters. I know that. But before you hire a babysitter for your children, ask for recommendations. Be cautious about who you hire. And before you leave, take a few minutes and set expectations up. Her bedtime is this, his bedtime is that. Would you mind reading the baby a story? Just want to give you our rule about technology. Whatever it is he allowed to be on the computer? Is he allowed to be on an iPad? Do you want them showing their phones to your children? Whatever it is, go over it with all of them. Most importantly, check in with your kids. If you don't have a trusting relationship with the babysitter, check in with your kids. Ask them how their experience was. Call while you're away and say, hi, Ari, how you doing? How's it going? Okay? Make sure your children feel comfortable. I do want to say just one other thing. If your daughters or babies are babysitters and husbands are driving them home, I would say that your daughter should call you and say, Mommy, Mr. So-and-so is about to drive me home. I should be home in 10 minutes. But they should hear that your daughter is communicating and letting you know that she is going into a car with Mr. So-and-so. Make sure you have emergency information in your house in case there's ever an emergency so that it's easily found. I'm going to very quickly say that a family password is very helpful. Family password is whatever you determine in your house. One of my favorites is I have one of those headaches. Why? Because if a child were to say to anybody, I have one of those headaches, it would make sense that their parent would come pick them up. So one of those headaches, but you can come up with any one that works in your own home. The reason we say to have a password is if your child were ever, let's say, at a sleepover, okay, and something inappropriate or something that made them uncomfortable was happening at the sleepover, they can't go get a phone and say in front of their friends, Mommy, they're looking at pictures that are really inappropriate and I'm not comfortable, right? They can't do that. That would be too embarrassing. If they were to say, Mommy, I have one of those headaches, actually, just a few weeks ago, somebody called me and told me that her child does not have allergies, but their password is, I'm having an allergy attack. And she said that her daughter was at a sleepover. The girls were very risque. Her daughter didn't feel comfortable and called and said, Mommy, I'm having an allergy attack. If your child ever calls and says your password, you need to get in the car and go get them with no questions asked. And even when they get in their car, don't pound them with questions. Let them talk to you slowly. Stay calm. Remain calm. Before your child goes to a sleepover, have a conversation. Just remind them all these safe rules that we've talked about before, all the personal touch rules, they all apply when you go on a sleepover too. Touching is not a game and touching is not a secret, and that applies to a sleepover as well. And then you go over all those rules that we've talked about before. You might want to talk to them about pranks or bullying behaviors or things that might have happened to you when you were younger. Bring that up with them. And you need to let them know if you're uncomfortable with any games or discussions or pictures, or movies, or maybe rules that are different than ours, or if you don't feel comfortable, let's say, with siblings of theirs that are there or anything like that, use your family password and we'll come get you. You want to have that conversation. Don't do it every single time, but you do it when you feel it's important, and certainly before they go to a sleepover the first time. Safety and Shoal, you have to discuss in advance. You're in charge of your children's safety. Children are not supervised because they're in Shoal, and a lot of things have happened in Shoals. You need to know where your child is allowed to play. They should not be in any rooms that are unsupervised. They shouldn't go into private places alone. Adults should play with adults. Children should play with children. Your children need to know that. They need to know that. If there's a Candyman in Shoal, make sure that you vetted them. Most Candymen in Shoal are just fine, but make sure that you know that your child knows that they can't accept gifts from the Candyman unless they've asked you. They don't have to ask you every week. If you're comfortable with that Candyman, it's great. But you need to discuss that you can't just go to anybody and get candy. You have to ask me first before you get candy from somebody in Shoal. And be very realistic about the lack of supervision in most Shoals. And in terms of the Candyman, give your permission. You have to know that. It's great for you to know that in most Shoals, it would be important that the rabbi approve of whoever the Candyman is. The candy should be the same for everybody. All children should be given the same amount of candy and not, I like you better, so you get more. Recently, someone came to me and said that the Candyman used to give everybody one taffy. And then the Candyman said, if you want the taffy, you have to shake my hand and say good Shabbos. And then as of recently, the Candyman gave them the candy. They had to shake his hand, say good Shabbos, and then he gave them a kiss on the head. Pay attention. No special relationships should be developing. Let's take a minute and talk about warning signs of abuse. What would you be concerned about as a parent, right? This is the most important thing, is any significant unexplained changes that happen at home or in school, like school performance that's zooming down, their lack of ability to concentrate, depression, not wanting to school, staying in bed, hopelessness, anxiety, cutting. We had one girl who went to camp, was a wonderful straight A student, very social, came back from camp, didn't want to go to school, always in bed. And it was a dramatic change. And sure enough, something inappropriate had happened in camp. So that was a warning sign for her parents. If there are new fears, fear of strangers, germs, being alone, of fears of certain people that they may be afraid of. Any sleep difficulties, they're afraid of going to bed, afraid they can't fall asleep. Either real extreme modesty, covering themselves in many layers, or very promiscuous behavior or seductive clothing. If they have a lot of physical symptoms, headaches and abdominal pains and all of that. If there's changes in their eating, all of a sudden they're not eating, and very concerned about food, or bulimic eating and often throwing it up, or they start bedwetting or soiling, which they didn't eat. And I want to say something about these. First of all, if you look at one of these and you say, oh my gosh, my child's been molested, most children may have one of these. We're talking about a continuum, when there are many of them on a continuum, and when they're more dramatic or sudden and unexplained. We're not talking about one symptom. The other thing is, even if they have many of these symptoms, it's not necessarily an indication that they've been molested, but it is an indication, if they have many of these symptoms, that they are suffering and something is on their mind. And if they do have many of these, I would consult a mental health professional. Really quickly, why don't kids disclose? Well, they don't disclose. Firstly, if parents have never spoken to them, they feel like their parents don't know how, or are uncomfortable, so they don't speak to their parents. They don't have language or vocabulary to talk to their parents about it. They are embarrassed if things happen. They may have been told that it was a secret, or understood it was a secret. They may have been threatened that they would be harmed or their family would be harmed. They may be afraid of the abuser, and they may love the abuser who was so good to them, and they don't want anything to happen to them. They may have experienced pleasure and they're very ashamed of that. And they all feel ashamed and at fault, and maybe even convinced that they wanted it. And often families fear that they may be ostracized from the Kahila, so the families won't speak. But the number one reason that children don't tell is because they don't believe that anybody will believe them. And the number one thing we need to do is believe them. So how do you handle a disclosure? I'm going to go through this quickly. I know that you all know, because I've said it so many times, the very first thing you do is remain calm. This is so big in their mind, and they're really sure that you can't handle it. So when you go, what? What happened? What did they do? I don't know what you're talking about. He couldn't have done that. What they just learned is, my mom can't handle it. What do? They recant. Nah, nothing happened. I didn't mean it. No, I made it up. I didn't mean it. They won't talk. You have to stay really calm. Control your emotions. Don't act shocked. And you can pour out your emotions with your spouse later when your child is not around. Excuse me. Try to find a private place to talk. Only use your child's language. This is just a disclosure. You don't need all the details, and don't try to get all the details. The more you pepper with them with questions, the less they will talk. So if your child says, and then he pulled down my pants, you say, and then he pulled down your pants. That's it. They will know you're listening and you're paying attention. That's what they'll know, right? They'll feel understood, not led on, and you don't want to be involved in leading them on. Just reassure them about a couple things. Thank you for trusting me. I know this is hard. Oh, you're not in trouble. You did the right thing. So you want to thank your child for trusting you. Let them know they did the right thing. We never blame a child. A child is never to blame when someone has been inappropriate with them. We should never say things like, I told you not to go over there. Was your shirt unbuttoned to buttons? I told you if you unbutton your shirt. I told you that t-shirt was too tight. I told you your skirt was too short. We never bring that in. That does not cause molestation. Okay? Always believe your child. There's a 1% lie rate. Believe them. If you have to deal with something that wasn't true, you'll deal with it after. Let your child know, I'm sorry this happened to you. Because when you say, I'm sorry this happened to you, it lets them know somebody wronged you and I know that. And then let them know how you're going to help them or what your next steps are going to be so that you're communicating with them. So control your emotions. Reassure them, thank you for trusting me. Only use their language. You don't need the whole story right then. It eventually will all come out, right? Only use their language. Thank you for trusting me. You're not in trouble. I appreciate your talking to me. And I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm going to need to speak to your father, and we're going to talk about what we have to do to try to keep you safe. And we'll let you know. That's the kind of conversation you would have to have. I want to talk for a moment about camp. A lot of it's the same. The first step is your work to keep your children safe in camp happens before they go to the camp. You have to be an informed parent. Camp administrators need to know that parents talk to them. You need to be asking questions. Is there a training for camp staff on creating a safe environment for campers? Is there a safe camp policy for counselors and for camp staff to sign? Are staff left alone with campers in unsupervised or isolated areas? Can campers communicate with their family? What are the procedures that are in place for children to report concerns and to address either accusations or allegations or other issues? When are parents notified of allegations or other concerns that might happen in camp? These are things well before your child goes to camp. You need to know. Is the camp educated, aware, and prepared to keep your children safe? Do they have policies to keep your children safe? That's your work. The other thing that I'm going to say before your child goes, you have to determine who they're safe. And trusted adult is when they're in camp. If there's a camp director, if there's a camp mom, if there's somebody there that you know, if anything ever happened, that's the trusted adult they should go to. You identify that person, because when they're suffering, they're not going to be able to determine who's the safe person I speak to. So you have to help identify that person before they go. Have that conversation. You knew that I was going to say this. Have that conversation with your children before camp. Talk about the camp atmosphere, that it's looser in camp. Boys pull other boys' bathing suits down. Children may shame other children. Those are things you have to talk about with them in before camp. You should never.
Debbie, you're blinked out a little bit. Maybe your internet's going down. Maybe that's part of the sound issue. All right. Well, we can read the screen while we're waiting for Debbie to come back.
Changing times and showering times, discuss it with them and how they would handle it. Because you're opening a conversation. That's what we want. Remind them to remain in public places in camp and that they shouldn't be going alone with a counselor or an area that's not seen by others or others don't know that they're there. Let them know who to turn to and make sure that they know how to let you know if there's help. I do want to tell you one thing. Several years ago, there was something that happened inappropriate in a camp, a Jewish camp. In a bed next to a particular child, a counselor came in and was being inappropriate with a child. This child was awake, although they thought he was asleep. This child got up, went into the office, demanded his phone, said, I need 1/2 a minute on the phone. Picked up the phone, this is a true story, called his parents, said the password. By morning, his parents were there. And that person, that counselor, actually was prosecuted. And it was this child who kept all the children safe by knowing what to do. So, do this right now, sorry. But what I do want to say, I'm going to end here, is just that really, I'm hoping that these safety tools are here to keep all of our children safe at all times. And it helps prevent things from happening and to keep the safety of our children in our own hands and in our homes. So I'm hoping that this is helpful to all of you.
Thank you, Debbie. That was so incredibly helpful. We do have a few questions that I'm going to ask you now. If I could just ask you to stay as close to the mic as possible. You blinked out a couple times when you're talking about camp, but I hope everyone saw the screen. But actually, our first question, I'm going to go back to the camp conversation for a moment. And that is, since we don't have a way to monitor our children in camp, how do we stay calm and feel safe sending them for that length of time? What if we don't know who the safe person in camp is? What can we proactively do as parents for maybe big camps, and maybe we don't have a personal family member there in camp? What would be your words of advice?
Well, if they're in day camp, you're their trusted adult.
Overnight camp.
Right, but overnight camps, number one, like I said, ask a lot of questions before you go, before you have your child go. I am going to tell you that a parent called me. All the girls in the class were going to a camp that for 3 weeks, the children were not allowed to have a phone and couldn't call their parents at all. This one mother said, you know what? I'm not okay with it. That I don't see a way that if ever anything happened that she was concerned about, that she could communicate with me about. And one mother ended up pulling her very popular daughter out, and all the other kids ended up leaving as well, and they changed the policy. But you have to be comfortable. You have to do the background. You have to make sure that it's a safe environment and counselors are trained and all that. If you don't know who that safe person is in camp, then what I would say is directly ask the question, who's the camp mom? Who would be a good person if my child was ever uncomfortable? Who do you think they might be able to speak to? Ask the question. But all of our children need to have somebody, or even better is to ask someone who went there last year, who were people that were helpful and that might be safe people in camp. But your best bet is to have these discussions. Let them know about games that can happen. Let them know that they have a right to say no and that they need to speak up. Okay? And not to be alone, not to be taken alone into private areas. Stay in public areas. Touching private areas of the body is never a game and it's never a secret. So if something happened in camp and it's a game or a secret, it's not appropriate.
Thank you. And also, you mentioned before, we spend a lot of time focusing and worrying about camp, but you had quoted your statistics, 68% of the time it's at home. So we need to realize we have a lot more control that rather than worrying about a specific situation out there.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, our conversations are the same over and over. The most important thing is they know we are opening it up. We're talking to them, which means they can talk to us.
Thank you. Which someone asked, it wasn't really a question, it was more a comment. So if you could just elaborate on it, that of course, in order to be able to have these conversations and to remain calm with our kids, these conversations have to start early and frequent and often. So if you could just elaborate maybe a minute or two on the importance of that.
I want to say, whoever said that, thank you. Thank you for saying that, because that is incredibly important and that is the truth. Start them when they're 2 or 3 in a bath. That's when you want to start. Gently, in a natural setting, so that it doesn't feel like you're sitting down and having a conversation, right? Natural ways throughout their life when it's appropriate. And what they know is, my mom's the mom, I can ask her. I'll tell her, right?
Do you have all this information that you made in the slideshow? Do you have this in a book? Our parents are asking, is there a book that they could buy to educate themselves more thoroughly or read it more carefully?
I don't have a book. I have one book, that I wrote, but it's not about this. It's about girls going to seminary. Yanki Horowitz does have a book about touch for kids that is wonderful, and Maishi Bach has a book, Private Places, and Yanki Horowitz also has a book on safety for children. You can get them in any Jewish bookstore. They're both excellent books that can open conversation with kids where you can read them in a very natural way. I don't, like I say, I really don't have one for adults. There are books out there in the world at large that address them. I think that Bracha Getz may have some books too. She's written some wonderful books as well.
Right, that's Let's Stay Safe, and it's like, yes.
Let's Stay Safe. She wrote that for Yanki
Do you have a book about your presentation? Like right now, this kid safety presentation and program, is it available in book form, or is it education one-on-one with you educating the?
I haven't put it into book form. Maybe I should at some point, but I haven't.
Okay. All right. Next question. If someone does show sign of grooming, how do you address it? Do you talk to them directly? What does a parent do if they feel that someone in their lives that they are feeling is showing signs of grooming? Besides for stopping it for their own child, stopping that relationship, what else can they do, or what else should they do?
So that's an incredibly important question, and always an uncomfortable one for parents. Like I say, what do you do if it's a Rebbe in a classroom? Or we had a very significant situation of somebody who went to a special needs camp, and the counselor maintained contact after, which was appropriate in that camp for the counselor to maintain some contact, but it became extensive. And the parents were very concerned about the amount of time and money. And this kid traveled to come in to see their kid a lot. And it was secret time. They went for hours and the parents didn't know what was going on and whatever. So they were very concerned about it. And the boy didn't end up listening when they set limits on him. So what do you do is, if you have a sense that someone is not including you in the relationship, is somewhat inappropriate, or has an interest that you're not comfortable with your child, something I often say is, what is their role in your child's life? If they're fulfilling their role, they're a camp counselor, and so in camp, they're taking care of my child, well, that's appropriate. That's what they should be doing, right? But if it's not within the role of what that person should be doing, then that's something you need to be aware of. If you're uncomfortable, if it's too much, right, then what you need to do, the first step you should do is find out from your child in a very relaxed way about the relationship, see what you can find out. The second thing, in most situations, I would let the person know, I'm not comfortable with this. I would really prefer that you do other things and that we separate the relationship. And I'm going to say, if it was a healthy person and you said, I'm not comfortable with your relationship with my child, they would step out. If it's an unhealthy relationship, they're not going to step out, and you're going to find them sneaking to have the relationship. You may need to get other people involved at that point in that relationship, whether it be the Rav, whether it be someone within a school, whether it be community members. There's one community that I'm dealing with right now who had somebody in their community, a small community in a city. They have lots of little communities. And in their neighborhood, there was somebody, and they got actually a grassroots effort. They pulled a committee together. They set limits on the guy. They had to, because they did include the community Rav in it, but they didn't have an avenue like a camp or a school or whatever to say that this is inappropriate. So number one, if you can speak to them, that's what I would do first. If you see that it remains inappropriate, then you have to see who are the appropriate people to speak to about keeping the person away, and include your own discussion with your child about why it's inappropriate.
Okay, so step one would be that you talk to that person directly, and if it's a healthy person, it'd be, oh, oops, I didn't mean that. Back out.
Right, right. And if you were to say, I didn't mean that, and I'm, you know, I'll step away. I didn't mean for it to be that. Then that's makes perfect sense. But if what you see, like I say, is they're sneaking to continue the relationship, or they can't let go, then there's an unhealthy relationship. And you are the parent and have to do everything you can to make sure that the relationship stops.
You had mentioned an example of the, let's say, the Shabbos table where the children go off to play all over the house, that someone should stop every 10, 15, 20 minutes to just check or schmooze on what's going on. What should a parent, besides for being calm, which they actually do, if they come into a situation that they actually find to be inappropriate, what should actually be done with those?
Right.
With
so
those
what? Right. So first thing, you're right. Stay calm. You'd say the first thing you'd say is something like, "Whoa, if they're little kids, like I said, state the rules and redirect." Right? State the rule. Whoops. We never play games. We never play. Touching private parts is never a game. So let's put your clothes back on. We're going to go into the kitchen. We're going to play Mag Tiles, but we never play games with private parts. If you see it's over and they're very little, 3, 4, 5 years old, I wouldn't make much more of it. But at night, when I sit on their bed, I go over those rules and I would ask more questions at night. I might say, how did you play that game? What happened? You ever played that game before? Right? You'd be very easy in that way. If it's older kids and you see that, you got to stop it right away. And then you'd want to ask some questions, but in a very calm way. Can you tell me what you were playing? You might not be able to ask when friends are around if they're older kids. It might be stopping the game, telling people to go home and dealing with it with your individual child alone. So that you can get some information, but you don't want to embarrass them by making a big deal in front of all of them. But I do want to say something, because this happens frequently, that there are 3 or 4 boys or 3 or 4 girls who are playing inappropriately with each other. It is important to notify the other parents of what they were playing or what they were doing. And each parent should be talking to their child. And you have to figure out, can these kids play together on a Shabbos afternoon or whatever? Was this a one-time thing? What actually really occurred? Can we not make a bigger deal out of it than we need to? Can we, is it a bigger deal than we think? But the calmer we are, the more not stressed we are, the more they'll actually tell us whether we should or shouldn't. I'm going to give you just a quick example of something. I have a friend, a colleague of mine, who's been to workshops of mine, and we've been colleagues for years. And he calls me up one day and he says, he lives in another city on the East Coast, and he says, "Debbie, I know what you've said. I am not calm." I said, "What happened?" He says, "I'm in the middle of a conversation with my son, and he tells me that he and his sisters have been playing games with each other." I said, "What did you say?" He says, "By the way, am I on? Are you still there?" Oops. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I just moved
okay.
the screen. Yeah.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't. That's okay. So he said, I didn't know what to do. I was so upset. I got in my car and I drove off. If I knew that if I wasn't going to be calm, I shouldn't be there. I told him I'll be back. I have to go do something, and I got out. So I said to him, I calmed him down, son, and I said, "What were they playing?" He goes, "I don't know. I didn't figure that out." I said, "Okay, we got to calm down. You've got to go home. You got to practice with your wife having a calm conversation. You've got to ask some questions. You got to ask some questions." And he did. And they went home and they sat down at their kitchen table. And they had all the kids there, 3 kids. And he said, Maishi told me that you guys were playing a touching game. Can we talk about it? Can we see what was going on? And they did. They told him what the game was. And he was like, "Okay, so let's go over the rules. Let's go over the rules and we'll see What's allowed? What's not allowed? Let's go over it. And he went over the rules with everybody. No touching, no looking at, da, da, da. It was far less than his fantasies were, what had actually happened. But because the conversation was so calm, they actually all said what the game was and what they were doing. And then he said to them when they were finished, I want to say something. You know, we're not allowed to play touching games. So none of these games are allowed to happen. But what would happen, Sarala, if Maishi did walk into your room and want to play that game? What would you do? Then you have to stop immediately and come tell mommy or Tati. What happens, Maishi, if you wanted, you know that Tati said we're not allowed to play touching games, and you just felt like, but I really want to. Then you have to come tell me and I'll help you. So it became a window of opportunity, but it is important that we ask questions, because when we ask questions, we know a lot more about what actually happened, but we have to stay calm to do that.
Thanks. My next question would be, okay, so now someone follows up, and they discover either way, either they discover that there truly is something concerning that happened with their child, or as you said, the uncomfortable situation where someone discovers that their child perhaps is struggling with this and they're the predator. How does a parent go about seeking help in a way that protects the privacy of their family as they deal with it? How do they know? Are all therapists the same? What's the next step? What does a parent do for each side?
It's really an important question and a difficult question. If something were to happen at home, it's a very difficult question. I believe that in New Jersey, the law is changing, that if you get, I believe this is true. This is what I was told. I don't have verification. And I think in New York, they may be moving towards this as well. And I'm hoping that other states are moving towards this, which is that if a sibling was the offender, that if you get the sibling help, you do not need to make a child abuse report. Because that is the most difficult thing, is for a parent to protect their daughter, but they have to make a child abuse report against their son. So I think there are many states now where you don't have to make a child abuse report, but you do have to get your son appropriate help. How do you go about doing that? That's really hard. I think that the best way to do it is to use one of the organizations that actually helps with referrals, like Relief. Relief is the one that I'm most familiar with. And
that's Relief. For all of you out there, that's reliefhelp.org, and they refer you based on location and many other questions and the specific type of therapist that you're looking for. Reliefhelp.org is an amazing resource for the
amazing resource. They are extremely aware of these issues, and they can offer very good guidance. Many of you may be in areas where there's a Jewish family service, or where there are mental health professionals who may know these areas, but you need to go to someone who has an area of an expertise. Now, what I'm going to say is, if a son is involved in touching a sister, that son needs help with someone who understands these issues, and the daughter also needs help. They both need help, and it's important to get them both the appropriate help. You want to look for someone who has experience in this area.
Thank you. Regarding young siblings getting dressed in the same room or bathing, do they need to be strictly separate, or is it occasionally it's fine as long as a parent's in the room? What age or stage are they allowed? What age or stage can siblings get dressed and or bathe together with a parent in the room or not? What age or stage would you say are the rules here?
What Dr. Nagel, who's a very well-known pediatrician in Los Angeles, says is, when they start to really notice the difference is the time for them to stop. Not meaning if they're in a bath and they're 3 or 4 years old or whatever, 5 years old, they're in a bath, they take a bath, they go out, they're fine. It's fine. But when they start to really pay attention to the differences in their bodies and to be very curious about it, again, you want to be very calm about it. But at that point that they're really curious and focused on the differences in each other's bodies, that's the time that he says to stop.
What about siblings of the same gender?
If siblings of the same gender, I guess in general, unless there's a real specific curiosity or something that you're seeing that is raising red flags in you, I'm not sure that they need to be separated.
Okay.
But yet, remember the rules, reviewing the rules with them, we don't touch private areas of the body, even sisters, we don't. That's fine. That's important.
Right. What if there's a family member that you're uncomfortable with and you can't keep away from them? What would be your tips? I mean, besides I'm going to address the person who asked the question. We have some of the tips are all this conversation and rules that you're setting with your child. But in addition to that, besides my first reaction, that'd be if you can weigh in on what are the tips if there's a family member that you're not so comfortable with, but there isn't really a way that you can keep them away completely from your family.
Well, I am going to say that you really have to pay attention to what your discomfort is. I can tell you there was someone who called me not long ago from one city, and he's not the only one who's brought this issue up to me, that he called and told me that he's concerned about his own father with his children, with two of his sons. He said, I can't forbid my father from seeing my children. I just can't do that. But he did set up a system that he himself took the responsibility of being in the room with his father at his home, whenever his father came to his home. He very much limited his parents coming to his house. He very much limited it. And he very much limited when he went to his parents' house, but he took the responsibility of always being with his sons. You have to take responsibility. If you're afraid or uncomfortable of making sure that adult or person is not in your children's lives, there's no way your child can prevent it. So either you're super responsible for that supervision, or you're going to have to really work on not having them around. You're going to have to really work on that.
How do families reconcile if there is abuse, like between cousins, or if an uncle aunt? How can there be reconciliation amongst greater family if there's something happens within the family?
That's an incredibly important and highly complicated question. I'd say it's not within the purview of what exactly we're doing here, which is talking about prevention. But what I would just say is this: it is extremely specific to the situation. There's a victim there and there's an offender there. With the victim, I don't know what phase that victim is at. Is the victim still working on the issues? I'm trying to help out in a situation right now where a young woman is just coming out with the abuse right now and is struggling and suffering terribly. This isn't a time for families to be working on reconciliation when she can barely get the words out of her mouth, right? It has to be sensitive to the victim, and in most cases, the victim's therapist and the victim need to be part of feeling that this is appropriate for them at this time. Meeting the victim's needs is often extremely important at a time when families are talking about some type of reconciliation. If families want to reconcile and the girl says, I can't have that, I can't go to a family simcha if the uncle is there, then that may be what she has to say, is she's just not comfortable being with him anymore. She can't be in the room with him. We have to be very sensitive to the needs of somebody who's been victimized, because remember, even if they did something.
We think we lost the, I'm not sure if you hear me, Debbie, or not, but we don't hear you. You froze up.
Them or people defended the predator. It creates more trauma for them. So these traumas affect their lives, and we have to be very cautious not to re-traumatize a victim.
So important. Thank you so much, Debbie. Another request for the book. So we have a lot of people who want your book out there. In the meantime, until you do that, would you be willing to, some of the slides you went through really quickly, but it had a lot of important talking points. Is there a way that you can maybe share some of those slides, either again now or later, so that people can look at it as a base for talking with their children?
I do have a handout.
Okay.
I have a handout. I can email you the handout. And you can send it to whoever you want and see if that'll be helpful.
Perfect. That'll be amazing. So for all of you who asked, we'll post a handout under the recording of this video. Okay, let me just check if there's any more questions. Okay, at what age is it appropriate to allow your child to go to the mikvah with their father?
Forgot about that one. We have a whole talk on the mikvah. I
This
never.
doesn't have to be hashkafic and overall. I'm going to put that disclaimer. Everyone should go.
No.
Fear and love, but
I was just saying we do a whole unit on mikvahs.
Okay.
I don't utilize ages. I don't. I'm in general, because maturity levels are so different. The conversations you've had with them are so different. It's.
You keep on losing. Debbie? I'll check the questions in a while.
Boys, when they go with their father.
You blinked out a minute. So you talked about the ages and stages of maturity. If you could repeat from that sentence.
Okay. I think that boys need to go with their father, and it needs to be a window of opportunity and a teaching moment. I think fathers need to be telling their sons what they are doing in a mikvah. I have many times spoken to fathers. Less than 5% that have ever had a discussion about it, ever. They just go in and that's that. You have to recognize our boys are not used to seeing men's bodies. They're not used to seeing each other's bodies. They go in and all of a sudden it's a different world for them. And I think that needs to be discussed with them by their fathers. This is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to see. If you have any questions,
I feel like this is such an important conversation, but since the internet keeps on spazzing, I'm going to take it as a sign that it's time for us to wrap up.
And nobody should be looking at your private parts, and certainly nobody should want to touch or talk about your private parts while you're at the mikvah, and nobody should ask you to look at or touch or talk about theirs, even at the mikvah. And if they do, that's definitely something you need to tell Tati, and I'm going to make sure that you have help. It's not a time to laugh or joke or play games. When we go to the mikvah, we go in, we go quickly, and we leave. And parents need to model that for kids, that it's a serious place. Because I know that within Chabad, you go often, which is fine and wonderful. There are many people who feel that before Bar Mitzvah, boys are not ready to go. I leave that to your Masorah.
Right. Okay. Just due to the technical difficulties, I want to just thank Debbie for being here with us today.
Serious conversation between father and son, both about the meaning of a mikvah, the seriousness of a mikvah, what's going to happen at the mikvah, and about protecting themselves. That conversation needs to happen before going. And
all right, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you so much, everybody. Please continue to follow us at My Mikvah on Facebook, mikvah.org. Have a wonderful Shavuos. Wishing everyone a Kabbalas HaTorah, B'simcha, B'pnimius. We should have safety in our homes, conversations with our children. I'd like to remind everyone that we have a webinar called Conversations with Our Children that does show us how to begin from a very young age as we go through. You could see it visually at mikvah.org/mall/rentals, or you can listen to it on our podcast thanks to a generous donor who has stepped forward to make sure that every parent can access this information. Thank you so much, Debbie. Your internet has gone in and out, but I want to thank you so much for giving us this crucial information. Everyone listening, Thank you for joining us today. Look out for the recording, and underneath the recording post, there will be the handout. Be'ezras Hashem. A good Yom Tov to everybody, and good night. Thank you, Debbie.
Good job, too.